in speaking with you the other day, the ocean said, "What are you going to do for me?" And that is the first time the ocean ever asked. So for the catalyst that you are for me and my family and my clients and my community, just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you, honey.
You too. So I'm so excited today to talk with you about the things that spiritual entrepreneurs are needing now. The first thing that I want to talk about is conversion, because my sense is that spiritual entrepreneurs really struggle with asking and with receiving. And I remember at an event that we were at 15 years ago, there was a woman there who said, "I'm in the spiritual closet. I don't know if I can be out in the world and be spiritual." And you said that you had not really felt that way in your own experience. So what is it that has allowed you to ask and receive?
Well, I think it's a misunderstanding of spirituality, to think that it has nothing to do with the world. Spirituality is an open heart and a compassionate embrace of the world. Separating yourself from the world, calling that spiritual, is really withholding from the world the gifts and the blessings that you were born to give to it. So business is just another form of ministry. You could be a teacher, you could be a business person, you could be a scientist, you could be a politician. And the same is true in relationships. You could be a parent, you could be a lover, you could be a friend. It's not about the form of our service, but there is no serious spiritual life without service. There's no spiritual or religious tradition that gives any of us a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. And that's what business is. Business is about taking whatever the gift, whatever the skill, whatever the expertise that could possibly be of value to others, and the exchange of energy in such a way that there is a win-win. You put out the product, they give you money, they walk away with value, and you walk away with value. It's an ethical and an enlightened process when it does hold to those ethical standards.
I think it's beautiful. I don't even need to quote what you've taught us about owning our worth, but I find at root that many spiritual entrepreneurs struggle with owning their value. And so can you talk for a moment about what has inspired you to know that you have value? What has inspired you to know that people in the world need to act from value?
Well, my value is no greater or lesser than anyone else's. That's the point. I don't think we get there by thinking we're special. I think counterintuitively we get there by knowing that we're not. We're no better, no worse than anyone else. It just so happens that everyone is of inestimable value. When you realize that, you realize it's not about you. It's not that you're any more worthy than anyone else. It's that God does not create junk. It's that a human being is a precious thing of infinite potential. And that when you are not owning that, once again, you're denying your gifts to the world. It's that quote of mine from A Return to Love that has become quite well known. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking. It's call it a lot of things, but I wouldn't call it spiritual. It's a kind of cop-out on a certain deeper level from involving yourself in whatever process could possibly be of value to others.
I was really struck by the quote in the Law of Divine Compensation where you talk about starving children in Africa is due to lovelessness. I think there's a correlation between us owning our value, stepping into our gifts, and actively actioning love.
Well, 1 billion people on this planet live on less than $1.25 a day. Now, that's a policy decision, because the richest countries in the world could eradicate deep poverty if we wanted to. Here in the United States, there are millions of hungry children. We have the highest poverty rate of any advanced nation. So there's nothing spiritual about looking away from that. You know, there's a difference between denial and transcendence. To just say, oh, I'm going to ignore that, that doesn't have anything to do with me or my life. There's nothing spiritual about that. There's nothing transcendent about it. Transcendence is when you see it and you ask in your heart how you could in any way be part of the solution. And if you are a citizen in a democratic society, and there are many democracies, not just the United States, but if you are a citizen in a democratic society, you simply cannot truthfully say that you can't do anything to effectuate change, because that's what elections are about.
I find it so profound because anytime I speak to anyone about Marianne, we talk about there are seeds that you planted inside of all of us decades ago that now are ready for harvest. And many of us are mothers, and many of us look at the world and are very deeply concerned. And what I find most prophetic about your service is that in this harvest, there are more seeds. There are more generations that can be impacted by our service as spiritual entrepreneurs than I think that we've ever thought about. I think that the downside of just being in spirit and not being in action is that we fail future generations, if I'm that bold. I think that we think about ourselves, and I think that we see a state of the world that is impacted by the fact that the things my grandmother did, yes, impact, yes, please.
Well, there's nothing spiritual about that at all. It's a faux spirituality.
That's correct.
I mean, if you're not thinking about future generations, if you're not thinking about the earth, if you're thinking about not just, if you're not thinking about just not your own, just your own children, but other people's children as well. This idea that that's this connected, transcendent spiritual state, actually, no, it's not. So I think that's the first thing, you know, heaven and earth shall become as one, means they will no longer exist as two separate states. When a Christian is wearing a cross, the whole point of the cross is the intersection of the axis of the earth and the axis of the divine. Same with the Star of David. You have the triangle pointing to the earth, intersecting the triangle pointing to the sky. It's that we, in us, we inhabit a space that is the intersection of the two. So caring only about the earth but not the sky is unbalanced, but so is caring only about the sky and not the earth. You're incarnated for a reason. And especially if you're going to call yourself a business person or an entrepreneur, don't tell me you don't care about the earth plane. You care about the earth plane, but if you're disconnecting it from the suffering of others, you only care about the earth plane as it pertains to you, which is not spiritual at all.
Well, I think that we're failing as spiritual entrepreneurs. I think that we have not created a wave and a movement that has changed things in the way that some other things have. I think it is our time to step up. When I speak to anyone about you that's a close client, they start crying because of not only how much you've touched them, but also how much is at stake. Like, there has never been a time like now where we need to rise up and band together as community and take action. I think that that is the godly thing to do.
I think also, if we have been, as we have been for years and years and years, practicing this stuff,
yeah,
you know, the Course in Miracles says that every situation is another rehearsal of the same lesson. Once you've had enough experience and you've seen how principles of transformation affect your life, influence your situation, influence the people around you, then we get to the point of realizing, wait, we went through all that so that in our accumulated wisdom, we can now help save the world. You know, a lot of people in the transformational field are as selective in their reading of the Bible as are our friends in the sort of conservative and evangelical circle. And one of the places where the so-called spiritual types are very selective in reading the Bible has to do with the story of the apocalypse. So in the story of the apocalypse, there's going to be this huge battle, great destruction. And on the other side of it, there will be 1,000 years of peace. Now, if you look at, so a lot of times people from the transformational circle, we don't want to look at that story. But actually, if you look at it from a metaphysical perspective, it's saying something very significant. We can either, the Course in Miracles says, it is not up to you what you learn. It is merely up to you whether you learn through joy or through pain. So the human race is going to learn. We are going to evolve. We're either going to get there through pain or we are going to get there through wisdom. So what is the painful route? Well, the painful route will be World War III. The painful route will be global weather catastrophe. The painful route could be AI subjugating the human race. I mean, there's so many ways that we could take the catastrophic path to global change. But then there's another way to look at that. That situation within you, where basically it was a struggle between the two versions of yourself. And it was a great war, on the other side of which you find peace. Now, if enough of us take the lessons that we have learned from our own individual Armageddons and pool the resources of wisdom and intelligence that we gained, then we can avoid the global catastrophe that will otherwise be the only way that the human race can get it.
And I think about the things that I've learned in your spiritual process, where you are, what allows you to be who you are today?
Well, I think God is what allows all of us to be anything, but we ourselves make our choice. Listen, once you learn enough about how the universe operates, you learn that you are responsible for what you think, and you're responsible for how you behave. But you also learn that when you think and behave one way, you experience peace. And when you think and behave another way, you experience pain. So it's just another level of pain avoidance at a certain point to try to be a better person. You know, the Course in Miracles says we become generous out of self-interest. You know, I've lived enough to know I can cause myself great pain.
Yeah.
You know, I remember a time in my life, and I wrote about this in one of my books. I had thought of myself as that there were these rocky cliffs, and I just kept banging up against the rocky cliffs. And I remember a deep realization on my part. Marianne, you were not only the person being bumped up against the rocks, you were the wind.
That's right.
Pushing you.
That's right.
You know, the Course in Miracles says you pay a very high price for not taking 100% responsibility for your life. The price you pay is you won't be able to change it.
I was talking to my son, who's 11, and I said, what should I ask Marianne? And he said, you should ask her, what is she going to do about keeping women safe? It is not time for us to be spiritually conscious. It is time for us to be spiritually active.
I think when, you know, I grew up as a feminist within the space of the 1970s wave of feminism. And there was a strong realization that none of us were going to get there unless all of us got there. Sisterhood was an essential element. Sisterhood was an essential element. And it saddens me today how many women I see who don't seem to get that part.
Right.
We have to be there for each other. When you see a woman who is trying to lift some heavy weight up the mountain in a way that would serve all of us, help her. Help her.
Amen.
And I'll tell you something, when you talk about being a spiritual entrepreneur, this spiritual community has not been invulnerable to the seduction of certain kinds of capitalism.
Please speak.
And, you know, Adam Smith said, he was the primary architect of capitalism, and he said free market capitalism cannot exist outside an ethical context. So the high side of capitalism is a beautiful thing, but there's a shadow side. And that shadow side is where there is the search for profits at the expense of. Business should be a win-win.
Yes.
Business should be a win-win. And then it's fun. And then it's creative.
Right.
Everybody, it's exchange of energy, money. Who does the energy, you know? Which is just more exchange of energy. And there's this soulless capitalism. My brand, my clicks, my money. And when you use spirituality,
Oh,
the problem we have, Lindsay, is the disconnect between those with solutions and those with power. And too often people who really have the solutions don't have the power beyond just trying to raise money for their nonprofits. And people who have the power too often don't really want to hear the solutions, because the solutions do not necessarily provide short-term profits for some corporation. All it provides is maybe the chance for the planet to be habitable 100 years from now. So I think that if we are conscious, and if we are alert, and if we are observant, everything's already here for us. We don't even have to band together so much as we have to open our hearts.
wow.
The community already exists as a kind of architectural plan in the universe. We just have to play our part. But I see it. I see it where it's happening.
Yes.
I see where it's not happening. And all the politics is, I think there's a lot in the spiritual community. Oh, I don't do politics. I'm
Right.
too good.
Right.
All that politics is our collective behavior. That's all that politics is. That's all that politics is. So you have your money and your resources, and it's up to you to decide what to do with them. I have my money and my resources and decide what to do with them. Politics is where we say, all right, this is our money and our decision what to do with it. It's the same thing. It's just coming together to make wise collective decisions.
I remember when I was back at NYU, they talked about all the different dimensions, and there was the dimension of opting in, being in the structure, yes, and changing from within. And I think that as a spiritual being, it's one of the hardest things to do. And I just am so inspired by you.
Oh, thank you. I'm inspired by you too. Thank you. Every situation that we're in is the next step after another situation that wasn't that different, although you might not see that. And where you played it well last time, you get to play it even better this time. And where you didn't play it so well, you have a chance to do it better. Now, I think a lot of, I can't say a mistake a lot of people make, a mistake I certainly made in my life, is I thought business was something separate. Business is about human relationships as much as anything is. So learning how to be the person that we are capable of being is as important in business as in anything.
Absolutely. Any parting words that you think people who have economic agency and hearts that can be open need to hear before we go?
I do know this. I never made so much money as I did when I wasn't doing it for the money in any way, shape, or form. When I wrote my first book, the word bestseller wasn't even in my consciousness. When I started my career, this career niche that so many of us inhabit now didn't even exist.
Right.
So I wasn't ambitious. I wasn't ambitious for anything. I didn't have it in my head. Oh, I could sell books and then that would make money. I just wasn't in my consciousness yet. Almost like an idiot savant. But out of my innocence came so much abundance.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in other areas of my life. Replace ambition with inspiration. And when you do things for that more pure reason, the universe registers it. We live in a world today where there's so much clawing, there's so much grasping, there's so much, I gotta be better, I gotta be number one. It's tearing us apart. It's robbing us of the fun of business. I'll tell you something, and I have to figure out how to tell this story without revealing too much. I'm going to keep it very general. There's a business venture that I've been in for many years. And I've watched it change. And it used to be about the creativity and the joy of the creativity. Yes, I mean, there was a goal of selling something, but, that was, appropriate, that people had to make a living. And now you feel like you're on a corporate assembly line with everything you do. We've just taken the juice out of our civilization. We've allowed this corporatization of everything to just rob us of the joy. So I think we need to just be inspired to make the world a more beautiful place. And then everything we do, business and everything else, will follow from there.
Yeah, beautiful. It's an absolute pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you. I'm so just incredibly grateful for you.
Thank you. You too. You too. It's lovely to know you and get to do this